There is so much cocaine coming in, it's almost impossible to track it all.
We're also seeing this spate in violence.
Police, search warrant, open the door!
Organized crime, gun violence, and killings that are going even far beyond Australia's borders. Okay, I got an idea for what to do.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Hello, welcome to Meanwhile in Asia. I'm Kunal Sehgal.
And I'm Ivan Watson. And Kunal, the topic of today's episode is cocaine.
That's right. I mean, it's about the deadly violence in Australia because of the drug wars and also how Australians are consuming it at a record level.
Yeah, I think that this breaks a lot of stereotypes that I had certainly about
Me
Australia,
too.
which statistically, right, Australia consumes more cocaine per capita than any other country in the world, which is not what I expected to hear.
Yeah, and it's also Australia is the most lucrative market for the drug. Now, usually you would associate Australia with
Beaches,
pristine beaches,
koala bears,
Exactly.
kangaroos, right?
I mean, this
The
just
Sydney
like-
Opera House.
the Sydney Opera House. This was a real shock for me.
Yeah.
But I mean, as we're seeing record consumption. But because of that, we're also seeing this spate in violence.
Organized crime and gun violence and killings that are going even far beyond Australia's borders. So I think to dig deeper into this, we're going to turn to an expert who is down under, Hilary Whiteman. Hi there, Hilary.
Pleased to be here. I'm not often introduced as an expert on drugs.
Oh,
Well-
you sure are. I mean, I know you've been looking into this story for a while now. And should we start with the drug culture in Australia? Because like Ivan said, like we were completely shocked when we read this. How prevalent is the use of cocaine in Australia or in Sydney?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I know we have the highest rate per capita, but I don't want to give the impression that everyone in Australia is, snorting cocaine. This is very much isolated, I think, to a certain extent, to a very small pocket of Sydney. The most wealthy people live there. It's glamorous. It's near the Opera House, near the ocean. This is where people have money. The rest of the country is struggling through a cost of living crisis. So what we're talking about is a very small subsection of the country, and they have a lot of disposable cash, and many of them like to spend it on cocaine.
There's some statistics we should refer to from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, which says that about 4.2% of people aged 15 to 64 in Australia and New Zealand have used cocaine. In comparison, that number is only 1.9% in the US and 1.7% in Europe. Another important factor here is the cost, right? Australia's far away from anything, frankly.
Yeah.
And that may figure into the fact that the price of cocaine per gram is about 200 to 250 US dollars, whereas
A gram.
of a gram of cocaine, right? Whereas in the US, it could be 120 to $200. In the UK, 60 to $100 are some of the estimates we've gotten. So there's much more cocaine use, as you've put it, in a smaller subset of society, and also the street value of it is much higher than anywhere else in the world.
Is there actually, like in Sydney, is there like a divide in Sydney about the people that take it or where they live? I'm just trying to understand
Yeah.
like how
haves
Sydney's
and the
divided.
have-nots.
Yeah, the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah, absolutely. And that line is often referred to as the latte line. So it's an imaginary line that goes from pretty much Sydney Airport northwest up through Parramatta. And the idea, I guess, is that on the eastern side of the line, that's where people are drinking lattes. And the closer you get to the coast, the more, elaborate your drink may be. And to the west of the line, they're drinking instant coffee. And obviously, this is a huge generalization, but it does show the have and the have-nots, as you say. There is one section of society that can really afford to drop a few $100s a night on cocaine, while in the West, these are where the gangs are based and where people are fighting for a portion of that trade.
There has been reporting, Hilary, of some record drug busts carried out by Australian police. Can you tell us more about that?
It was a couple of weeks ago, and it almost was discovered by accident. So police had been called to what was a truck fire up north near a boat ramp. And when the police officers arrived and they looked off the ramp, they found some coke floating in the water. And that sort of led them further south, which is where pretty much all the cocaine that comes into Australia travels, down south to the western parts of Sydney. And they found a record haul buried between 3 containers. This was, concealed. It would have been enough to, done a huge number of drug deals. And this was a real victory for police because there is so much cocaine coming in, it's almost impossible to track it all. And obviously, Australia's east coast is very vulnerable. There are so many potential entry points for these shiploads to come in by sea, which I think is probably the easiest, although, by air as well, if it's really, carefully concealed. So there's a huge amount of drugs coming in, and there are many, many busts, but clearly the crime gangs are on top of police.
I mean, I was reading about this drug seizure. This record drug seizure. So it was 2.7 metric tons, which police say, and this is crazy. Police say it's enough for 3 million street deals. It was worth about $500 million.
And I think we should also kind of point out, we've been talking to some of our colleagues, folks who live in Sydney and have friends on the eastern side of the so-called latte line, and they do describe how prevalent cocaine use is in the nightlife,
Absolutely.
In the bars, in the nightclubs, that it's absolutely common to go into the bathroom and people are doing cocaine there. And it's kind of, nobody really looks twice at it. And there doesn't seem to be a real effort on the part of the authorities to crack down on cocaine possession. In fact, you really, according to the regulations in Australia, as far as I understand, you only face perhaps up to 2 years in prison if you're caught with cocaine. And that doesn't seem to be something that's terribly enforced.
You think about it, how difficult is it to go around all these pubs and bars where it is happening, it's so prevalent, and really attack it from that angle. There just aren't enough police to get around. And also, too, when you think about it, if you've got enough money to drop, hundreds of dollars on cocaine over a weekend, you've got access to some pretty good lawyers. So I feel like, the police are trying their hardest, but, potentially maybe focusing on the import, focusing on the crime gangs, because there's the violence wrapped up in it as well, right?
So I think the growing demand for cocaine in Sydney is being met by these criminal gangs, and which is why we're seeing this spate of violence, because they're vying for a share of this lucrative market.
The most lucrative market
in the world.
Australia is engaged in a deadly cocaine war right now between
that's the thing. With
organized
drugs
crime
comes
groups.
Violence. There have been a number of incidents now in Sydney, and especially in Sydney West, which seems to be the ground zero for this violence. I mean, there have been some really horrendous incidents over the past few months and years.
So we've had 18 months of this escalating violence. So we're talking about fire bombings, obviously arson attacks, drive-by shootings, kidnappings, demands for ransom, attempted murder, the whole range. It's becoming so severe that it's not just happening, I guess, in the western suburbs late at night. There are attacks taking place during the day around kids. And police, have said that there used to be a code of honor where crime gangs wouldn't go near the family members of their targets. But now it seems that all bets are off. And so everyone's a target. And the problem is that you've got more and more people being pulled into this world, and that creates more potential targets because they won't just go for people who've been contracted for a job. They'll go after their families and their friends, and anyone they think that might be a way to get even.
And I understand that the violence is crossing borders. That in May, there was an assassination in Vietnam, in Ho Chi Minh City, involving the alleged leader of a group called the Coconut Cartel. Can you tell us more about that?
That was Lorenzo Lamalu. So he is said to have been connected to the Coconut Cartel, and he was in Vietnam. So what happened is, according to this police there and CCTV footage, He and an associate were at a restaurant at Ho Chi Minh City, and two gunmen came out and shot both of them. Now, Lamalu died. And two Samoan nationals were arrested. According to Vietnamese police, they have admitted to the crime and said that it was organised by someone overseas. Now, this sent shockwaves through Australia and through the crime gangs here in Western Sydney, because really, a lot of violence had been confined to Western Sydney, parts of Sydney. And here we are having a really high-profile figure taken out thousands of miles away. So it really did show to police that this has gone global now and that nowhere is really safe. And that's important because recently there's been obviously the police crackdowns, but there's been this escalating violence. So some of the cartel leaders have moved offshore for safety.
From what I understand, there are two main organized crime groups, the Alamuddin group and the Coconut Cartel, which had been working together in the past and now have been at war with each other. In your excellent article, you showed video of the funeral of Lorenzo Lamalu, where his coffin was paraded and it had Quranic inscriptions on the coffin. And there was actually a spraying of bullets on the funeral home a day before the funeral took place, where it was thought that the funeral was going to take place, and filmed and released online. So that's just giving you a sense of how flagrant some of the violence is that's taking place right now.
I mean, bullets are flying everywhere. And I say that not wanting to give the impression that, Sydney is a war zone, which it isn't. Obviously, there are lots of people who are happily going about their day-to-day lives. But, there is an element where people have been caught in the crossfire. Say, for example, there was a grandfather, I think you may have read about him earlier this year, who was abducted from his house. And that was a case of mistaken identity, right? They were targeting someone else, and he ended up being taken to a house.
Things didn't end well for that man, right?
Oh, awful. Like, seriously, Ivan, the police were coming out day after day to say, look, you have the wrong man. And nothing happened. I think there was a hope that they would give him up. But ultimately, several days later, they found his body in a field.
There is a hip-hop artist in Australia named Ali Yunus who goes by
you were
Huncho,
talking about it the
right?
other day. Yeah.
And he has alleged ties to the Alamuddin group. And police busted what they said was a plot to try to kill him that involved flying drones over a sports game that he had been attending. And they ultimately had a car chase and captured the people that were allegedly part of this. If you look at his music and his image, it kind of glorifies this kind of gang culture in Western Sydney and in particular that neighborhood, Marylands, right?
And that's a really good point, because there is a cachet, I think, of joining these gangs. So, yes, of course, the money plays a part. If, someone is being offered thousands of dollars to carry out a hit or an attack, that, sure, money is one thing, but, it's a club. People want to feel a sense of a membership. And sad as it is that, there are some kids who are really susceptible and vulnerable to being poached by members of crime gangs to join them. And once they're in, it's really difficult to get out.
How is so much cocaine coming to Australia? Because, largely it's produced in South America. So what is the trade route that's actually being taken by these drug smugglers and these syndicates?
Yeah, totally right, Kunal. It's South America, obviously, where most cocaine comes from, and it goes via the Pacific Ocean. These are vast tracts of empty sea where no one is operating police operations. You've got a huge distance to cover before you get from South America to the Pacific Islands. So once you've crossed that, using perhaps, a narco sub, which have been found, once you get to the Pacific Islands, then you've got a whole network of other people who, will be happy to take on jobs, who might be recruited with either money or some drugs themselves to try and smooth the flow of the product to Australia. But with the narco subs in the distance, they've found several of those subs around Pacific Islands sort of washed up after they've been used to transport the drugs across, that vast distance.
So you have this apparently booming oceanic smuggling operation and this unprecedented violence that's taking place. And I think this is another area where it breaks some of these stereotypes that I think outsiders like me have about Australia, which is the amount of gun violence involved here. Because Australia has often been presented in the U.S., for example, where gun control is such an emotive issue. Australia is presented as the country that found a way out after a mass shooting in 1996, a buyback program to take guns off the streets. But everything we're seeing and hearing suggests there's still a lot of guns around and they're being used and they're killing people.
And I know that's the image Australia likes to project, that we got on top of the gun crime. But, they find ways to get them in. So right now, I think there's an estimate there might be like 4 million or so guns in Australia, and most of those are in New South Wales. But the problem is, you can dismantle guns. You can, put them in different shipments. Some of them are plastic, so they can't be detected. That's a whole other trade beyond the drugs. So, ways you can get, these tools to sell into the country are another huge problem for police.
Thanks, Hilary, for that deep dive into the drug culture in Australia and about the spate of violence. I mean, I would strongly suggest our viewers to read Hilary's excellent piece, a deep dive on how this drug culture is growing in Australia. You can read it on CNN.com. And now I think I really want to move to another thing that I did not know about Australia.
Get ready for some whiplash, viewers.
This is completely different to what we're talking about.
Because we're going to break another stereotype about Australia and turn to another project Hilary has worked on. She is not only our crime reporter, but also apparently our rodeo reporter. I did not know that there is an Australian rodeo culture. So let's take a few seconds to take a look at something you worked on earlier.
At just 6 years old, Kalijah Bond Blackman loves riding bulls. He sat on a bull before, but this is the first day his mentors are letting him go.
Watch him, ready?
Like any other bull rider, Kalijah wants to hang on for a full 8 seconds.
Okay, firstly, Hilary, I just want to know, how was it covering that rodeo experience? I mean, I've never been to a rodeo, so I don't know. I'm just
did
curious.
Did you get on a bull?
Wow. Look, no, let me put that straight out there. There was no bull riding from me. No way. And that's part of the reason why I was fascinated by these kids who jump on bulls on the weekend and try to stay on for 8 seconds. And curiously, I was kind of wondering what their parents, one was 6 years old. And his mother, bless her, she was sitting off to the side and almost couldn't watch as he got on this bull, and he ended up underneath its hooves, which, is pretty predictable. I mean, it's going to happen sometime. But I was fascinated as to why children would want to do this on the weekend. And the answer was really, it's just, I guess, just 8 seconds or a few seconds of complete silence where no one's telling you what to do. Your mind is completely, solely focused on this one task of holding on. And they seem to get a buzz from that.
Right. Another excellent story to check out if you want to on CNN.com
Excellent, fun
or
story.
on the CNN app. Thanks so much for bringing that to us and joining the program today, Hilary.
Thank you. It's been fun.
What a journey we've been on today, Kunal. We've gone from these deadly cocaine wars to the Australian rodeo, basically two subjects I knew virtually nothing about 14 days ago. And I think it highlights just the incredible work that colleagues like Hilary are doing week to week.
Absolutely. I mean, And this is why we started this show, right, Ivan? I mean, to just highlight, shine a light on the breadth of stories that CNN journalists in Asia Pacific are doing. And it's
Go a little bit beyond the breaking news and the headline.
Yep. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.